Good evening, everyone. It's such a joy to be with you here today. And I wanted to let you know that I come to this text as a white woman, married to a wonderful guy named Steve for 45 years, living in the United States of America with all that each of these contexts brings. My wisdom on the book of Job is both hard-won and yet garnered through my own realities, but also limited by them. Those realities of birth, social location, and circumstance. But thankfully, Job is a universal story, a meta story for the ages. So whatever our journey, we can draw richly from its wells. We'll begin today with a meditative reading from the introduction of the book of Job. I am using Eugene Peterson's paraphrase, the Message Bible. One day, when the angels came to report to God, Satan, who was the designated accuser, came along with them. God singled out Satan and said, "What have you been up to?" Satan answered God, "Going here and there, checking things out on earth." God said to Satan, "Have you noticed my friend Job? There is no one quite like him, honest and true to his word, totally devoted to God and hating evil." Satan retorted, "So you think Job does all of that out of the goodness of his heart? Why, no one ever had it so good. You pamper him like a pet. Make sure nothing bad ever happens to him or his family or his possessions. Bless everything he does. He can't lose. But what do you think would happen to him if you reached down and took away everything that is his? He'd curse you right to your face, that's what." God replied, "We'll see. Go ahead, do what you want with all that is his, just don't hurt him." Then Satan left the presence of God. Sometime later, while Job's children were having one of their parties at the home of the oldest son, a messenger came to Job and said, "The oxen were plowing and the donkeys grazing in the field next to us when Sabaeans attacked. They stole the animals and killed the field hands. I'm the only one to get out alive and tell you what happened." While he was still talking, another messenger arrived and said, "Bolts of lightning struck the sheep and the shepherds and fried them, burned them to a crisp. I'm the only one to get out alive and tell you what happened." While he was still talking, another messenger arrived and said, "Chaldeans came from 3 directions, raided the camels and massacred the camel drivers. I'm the only one to get out alive and tell you what happened." While he was still talking, another messenger arrived and said, "Your children were having a party at the home of the oldest brother when a tornado swept in off the desert and struck the house. It collapsed on the young people and they died. I'm the only one to get out alive and tell you what happened." Job got to his feet, ripped his robe, shaved his head, then fell to the ground and worshiped. "Naked I came from my mother's womb. Naked I'll return to the womb of the earth. God gives, God takes. God's name be ever blessed." Not once through all this did Job sin. Not once did he blame God. One day, when the angels came to report to God, Satan also showed up. God singled out Satan, saying, "And what have you been up to?" Satan answered, "Oh, going here and there, checking things out." Then God said to Satan, "Have you noticed my friend Job? There is no one quite like him, is there? Honest and true to his word, totally devoted to God and hating evil. He still has a firm grip on his integrity. You tried to trick me into destroying him, but it didn't work." Satan answered, "A human would do anything to save his life. But what do you think would happen if you reached down and took away his health? He'd curse you to your face, that's what." God said, "All right, go ahead. You can do what you like with him, but mind you, don't kill him." Satan left God and struck Job with terrible sores. Job was ulcers and scabs from head to foot. They itched and oozed so badly that he took a piece of broken pottery to scrape himself, then went and sat on a trash heap among the ashes. His wife said, "Still holding on to that precious integrity, are you? Curse God and be done with it." He told her, "You're talking like an empty-headed fool. We take the good days from God. Why not also the bad days?" Not once through all this did Job sin. He said nothing against God. I invite you into a time of quiet reflection and to think about these two questions. What is this reading bringing up for you in your life? And where does your story intersect with Job's? Take about 30 more seconds. So I invite you to just take a deep breath and take another deep breath, and we'll continue. In this past week, there were 2 Facebook posts that struck me so forcefully in relationship to Job. And one came from the Philippines, from a friend there, and it was C.S. Lewis in a quote from A Brief Observed. And it was just this quote: "If God's goodness is inconsistent with hurting us, then either God is not good or there is no God. For in the only life we know, he hurts us beyond our worst fears and beyond all we can imagine." And the other quote came secondhand from some friends who have done a lot of peace and justice ministry in Burma, which is now Myanmar. You may know it if you're older as Burma once upon a time. And if you don't know what's been going on there, this past few weeks, there has been a bloody military coup and a lot of loss of life and millions of people out on the streets protesting and villages being burned and people running to the mountains and to the jungles. And this is a quote from some folks in Burma who live in Myanmar. And this is what they say: "It has been 40 days. We have been praying, crying out to God, asking God to help, intervene so that peace and justice would prevail in our country. Yet it doesn't seem that God heard our pleas. It's so painful that we can't find God when we need God the most. Jesus says that if there are 2 or 3 gathered in his name and prayed, he will be in their midst. Now, millions of people in the country and in the world are praying ceaselessly. Nothing happened, as if God turned the deaf ear to us. Then we began to doubt God's presence, power, and care. Now we're weary and worn. Just don't know what to pray for, how to pray, even whether to pray or not. We're desperate, feel helpless when we still do not see any light at the end of the tunnel." A few years ago, a friend and I were sitting on a park bench in town catching up, and we began talking about our favorite Bible passages. "Mine comes from Philippians," she said, "that wonderful passage, 'Whatsoever things are good, true, beautiful, and of good report, think on these things.' It's so positive and uplifting. I just cannot understand how in the world the book of Job can be your favorite. I find Job so depressing." She made her point. How could I explain how much strength, courage, sustenance, and inspiration I have found in the book of Job throughout my life? Truth be told, Job has been my traveling companion, even, this may sound kind of strange, but even one of my closest friends for many decades. Might you expect me, a retired Christian pastor, instead to be leading off with such confessions about Jesus? But here is the paradox. I have met Jesus over and over through Job's story. The book of Job is unique as the only extended psychological portrait found within the biblical text. That makes it in itself a gold mine for contemplatives. It is a meta story, one for the ages, exploring a suffering individual, wrestling deeply with God and his circumstances. Job's journey is filled with contradictions between faith and doubt, hope and despair, love and anger. He argues and pleads into the seeming abyss of divine silence, experiencing the dark night of the soul of which mystics speak. Rabbi Harold S. Kushner, author of the Book of Job, When Bad Things Happen to a Good Person, explains that the prose sections of Job, which are found in those first 2 chapters and some of the last chapter, are based on an ancient Jewish fable. The poetic narratives in the body of the book challenge the theology of that fable. We initially meet Job as a wealthy, privileged, respected, compassionate, just, godly human being. Satan wagers with God, taunting the Holy One, saying, "You've given Job everything. Take it all away and let's see if he will worship you." Is Job's relationship with God purely transactional? I obey you and you bless me? Is it thus akin to prosperity theology, or is it something much more? Now, here's the visceral God question of the whole book. A lot of our Bibles, they have these little tiny parts that say the first test and the second test. But I think it's the question. I think it's the ultimate question. Would Job indeed worship God if he got nothing out of it? Would I? Would you? There is a breathlessness to the pace of consecutive cumulative catastrophe that befalls Job. In rapid sequence, the narrator recounts each tragedy which occurs, providing just one witness to report the most recent loss to Job. Thank God for the witnesses. Every generation of our forgetful human race depends on them. Harriet Tubman, Elie Wiesel, Anne Frank, Sadako, Rachel Carson, Oscar Romero, John Lewis, to name just a few. We could go on and on with the witnesses that come back and tell us the story. Job responds to his witnesses, "Naked I came from my mother's womb, naked I'll return to the womb of the earth. God gives, God takes. God's name be ever blessed." Job speaks truth about both God and ourselves. And I have read these words of surrender more times than I can count. Yet recently, Job's response struck me for the very first time as a trauma reaction. What if his only posture was worship because he was incapable of processing such a magnitude of loss so quickly? What if Job was actually in shock and only started to thaw once he began verbally engaging with his friends? Given the rest of the story, this is plausible. After the second round of questioning, Job loses his health. Physical agony and visible disfigurement join the agonies of the heart. Has there ever been a time in your life when you were just waiting for that next shoe to drop? When so much had gone wrong that you could hardly imagine anything going right? Did you pray and pray and pray, and the situation just got worse and worse and worse for a very long time, or maybe even for generations? Have family and friends lectured you or blamed you for your plight? Has God felt distant, more like an enemy than a friend? Over time, Job experiences all of this. There have been periods in my life when I literally ran to the book of Job. I'm coming, I'm coming. I remember the 2 years when our adolescent firstborn, Sarah, was hospitalized 11 times amid a severe ongoing mental health crisis that literally lasted throughout the rest of her life. The following year, 9th grade, she contracted a virus which took 3 months to diagnose. It left her sleeping 18 to 22 hours a day. My first act each morning was to get up and go to her bedroom to see if she was breathing. And once I saw she was breathing, I was thankful. And I still didn't know what was wrong. And I cried. There were also times I crawled to Job, reluctant, resistant, wailing, I'm not coming. I'm not doing this again. A year and a half later, I was just starting to catch my breath. And I was diagnosed with cancer. Not coming, not coming. But eventually I dragged myself back to Job. Truth be told, I have returned repeatedly to this narrative throughout my life. But I no longer put up an argument. It invites me, even calls me, and never fails me, and I just do it. There are core insights from the book of Job that I hold on to fiercely. The first of them is this: sometimes perseverance is the face of hope in our lives when hope itself seems in short supply. Let me just say that again, but not the whole sentence. Sometimes perseverance is the face of hope. Think about this. Is not perseverance a sign that tomorrow could be, yes, might indeed be a brighter and better day? As a pastor, so many times I talk to people who are dealing with chronic illness or family situations that were intractable for years and so many things. And I said, put one foot in front of the next. That's all. Survive, persevere. That is victory enough. And step by step, perseverance produces steadfastness. A much not talked about quality in our society. And a steadfast heart becomes a resilient heart, even when it doesn't feel resilient. Perseverance, steadfastness, resilience. Job's second gift to me is his determination to remain engaged with the Holy One who is silent, even when Job needs God the most. Just like our Christian brothers and sisters in Myanmar. Job cries, he prays, he argues with the shallow, trite theology of his friends. Job nostalgically remembers better times. He knows who he is, and he does not forget that. He knows who he was. He hangs on to his integrity, and he clings to the silent God. Job despairs and trusts. He despairs again and trusts some more. And finally, at long last, God meets Job in the whirlwind. Yet the Holy One never answers Job's questions about the problem of suffering. Darn. Isn't that what we have been looking for in the first 37 chapters of the book? The answers to the questions that we have, that Job has? Instead, God busts through Job's suffering in a dazzling display of the majesty and wonder of creation. For years, I was deeply disturbed by God's response to Job's profound distress and unrelenting lament. What does Job get for all this wrestling and struggle? An interrogation by God? A monologue about nature? How helpful is that? The key that unlocked Job's response for me first unlocked a very different door, but one not unrelated. And it happened at a Baptist Peace Conference when the Reverend Kim Mamadati, a Native American pastor, led the Bible studies. She was preaching in the creation stories in Genesis 1 and 2. And I had gone through, I'd grown up at the church. I had been in seminary for a while by then. And she just said something so simple that I was shocked that I hadn't thought of it quite this way. But she just simply noted that most of the creation story is not about humanity at all. The vast majority of it is about the non-peopled creation. Think about it. For centuries, particularly in Western culture, humans have viewed ourselves as the crowning achievement of creation. It's apex. It's reason for being. This has led to enormous problems, as well as a climate crisis, which looms large over the whole planet. Mamadati directly challenges the anthropocentrism or human-centeredness inherent in Western biblical interpretation of these foundational stories. After this eye-opening moment, I began to view God's response to Job in a different light. Job was not able to see God at all where he was looking. And here we encounter a third gift from the book of Job that can help you wherever you are, in whatever circumstance. If you cannot find God where you are looking, look someplace else. Let me say that one more time. If you cannot find God where you are looking, look someplace else. This is a lot to take in, so we're going to just take a moment to pause and just breathe a little bit. And then we're going to read the God monologue. I invite you to enter into this experience of the divine whirlwind, as well as the nature scenes. And I just want you to try to leave your head behind, even though you're on Zoom, and open a deep space within yourself as you listen to this text and hear this story. And now, finally, God answered Job from the violent storm. God said, "Why do you confuse the issue? Why do you talk without knowing what you're talking about? Pull yourself together, Job, up on your feet, stand tall. I have some questions for you, and I want straight answers. Where were you when I created the earth? Tell me, since you know so much. Who decided on its size? Certainly you'll know that. Who came up with the blueprints and measurements? How was its foundation poured? And who set the cornerstone while the morning stars sang in chorus and all the angels shouted praise? And who took charge of the ocean when it gushed forth like a baby from the womb? That was me. I wrapped it in soft clouds and tucked it in safely at night. Then I made a playpen for it, a strong playpen so it couldn't run loose, and said, "Stay here, this is your place. Your wild tantrums are confined to this place." And have you ever ordered morning? "Get up," told dawn, "get to work," so you could seize earth like a blanket and shake out the cockroaches as the sun brings everything to light, brings all the colors and shapes. The cover of darkness is snatched from the wicked. They're caught in the very act. Have you ever gotten to the true bottom of things, explored the labyrinthine caves of the ocean? Do you know the first thing about death? Do you have one clue regarding death's dark mysteries? Do you have any idea how large this earth is? Speak up if you have even the beginning of an answer. Do you know where light comes from and where darkness lives, so you can take them by the hand and lead them home when they get lost? Why, of course you know that. You've known them all your life, grown up in the same neighborhood with them. Have you ever traveled to where snow is made? Seen the vault where hail is stockpiled? The arsenals of hail and snow that I keep in readiness for times of trouble and battle and war? Can you find your way to the lightning, where the lightning is launched, or to a place from which the wind blows? Who do you suppose carves canyons for the downpours of rain and charts the routes of thunderstorms that bring water to unvisited fields, deserts no one ever lies eyes on, drenching the useless wastelands so they are carpeted with wildflowers and grass? And who do you think is the father of rain and dew, the mother of ice and frost? You don't for a minute imagine these marvels of weather just happen, do you? Can you catch the eye of the beautiful Pleiades sisters or distract Orion from his hunt? Can you get Venus to look your way or get the Great Bear and her cubs to come out and play? Do you know the first thing about the sky's constellation or how they affect things on Earth? Can you get the attention of the clouds or commission a shower of rain? Can you take charge of the lightning bolts or have them report to you for orders? Who do you think gave weather wisdom to the ibis and storm savvy to the rooster? Does anyone know enough to number all the clouds Or tip over the rain barrels of heaven when the earth is cracked and dry, the ground baked hard like a brick? Can you teach the lioness to stalk her prey and satisfy the appetite of her cubs as they crouch in their den, waiting hungrily in the cave? And who set out food for the ravens when the young cry out to God, fluttering about because they have no food? Do you know the month when mountain goats give birth? Have you ever watched a doe bear her fawn? Do you know how many months she is pregnant? Do you know the season of her delivery when she crouches down and drops her offspring? Her young ones flourish and are soon on their own. They leave and don't come back. So we will take 4 or 5 minutes again for silent reflection. And here are the questions. How is God speaking to you or touching your heart this evening? How has nature impacted you through this long pandemic year? What might be your own God monologue? I just invite you to sit with any of those questions that comes into your heart. We'll take about 30 more seconds. Okay. I invite you to do plenty more journaling. That this would just be a start. The year was 1994. I was 41 years old. I had just finished chemotherapy and radiation treatments for the non-Hodgkin's lymphoma, that cancer that I spoke about earlier. I flew to Green Lake, Wisconsin the next day to speak at a conference, which is kind of crazy now that I think about it, but that's what I did. Job was still pulling on me in the wake of the past 5 difficult years of our family's journey. While I had read the God monologue silently numerous times, I had never read it aloud. Early one morning, the lake beckoned me. The setting was magnificent. The sun gradually rose over the horizon. The morning light shimmered across the gently undulating surface of the water. Fish leapt in and out of the lake, splashing and dancing with abandon. No other human beings were anywhere in sight. As the Holy One roared out of the whirlwind, I began reading. Where were you when I created the earth? Tell me, since you know so much. How was its foundation poured, and who set the cornerstone? While the morning stars sang in chorus and all the angels shouted praise. On and on I read as my heart expanded wider and wider. Throughout God's incessant questioning, I heard an invitation for Job to open his eyes to what he previously had been unable to see. God wasn't just questioning Job that day. God was questioning me as well about what I could see and what I couldn't see. How much was I able to truly fathom the secrets and wonders of the vast community of creation? What capacity did this expanding awareness have to change me? When faced with personal suffering, a question we often ask in our hearts and sometimes say out loud if we have enough guts is, why me? Have you ever said that? Or has anyone you know ever said that? Herein lies another challenge of suffering. Our pain has a way of turning us in on ourselves. It easily leaves us incapable of seeing beyond our own wounds and loss. Job is inescapably stuck in his grief. This is no fault of his. It is endemic to human suffering. I ponder Job's loss when a lone family member survives a mudslide in Latin America, while 27 other family members perish. A bombing leaves scores of people dead in Yemen and only a handful of survivors. Children lose both of their parents to COVID-19. Or when the impacts of poverty, racism, homophobia, and other isms conspire together to strip lives of opportunity and dignity in the eyes of their neighbors. At long last, God comes to Job, not sharing, not revealing answers to Job's big questions, but posing God's own questions to Job. The Holy One breaks through the anthropocentrism or human-centeredness of both Job's vision and his pain. God's rapid-fire questioning rips the blinders off Job's eyes. Job simply becomes a witness. He arrives in a new place of seeing that offers fertile ground for a transformed vision, not only of his personal life, but also of his place within the natural order. I repent of dust and ashes is the translation Gustavo Gutierrez offers for Job's response in his book On Job, God Talk and the Suffering of the Innocent. Dust and ashes are ancient symbols of mourning, and to repent means to turn around. For Job to repent of dust and ashes did not mean that he was sorry that he grieved, struggled, and wrestled so mightily with God. Instead, it means that Job has arrived to a different place, one which does not ask him to forget the past, but allows him to move toward a new future. This is not a place Job could rush, hurry, or create for himself. It is a place he arrives through rugged experience. Job lets go of his need for answers to all his big theological questions. His deepest, most elemental need is and always has been to see, and see he does. Pandemic time has been for me thick time. I can't, if you ask me what that means, I don't know. I don't know what thick time means. It feels thick to me. And one solace for me throughout pandemic time has been immersion into that community of creation that God immersed Job in. A significant part of this immersion has been found with the hanging plant Steve and I placed at our daughter Sarah's grave last spring. Sarah died by suicide on Thanksgiving Day, 2011, at the age of 34. And each year for the past 9 years, we have bought such a plant. Our 2020 flowering black-eyed Susan surprised me by becoming my own God monologue. And I honestly didn't even notice the connection until Carol Creek, bless your heart, pointed it out in spiritual direction. But through the passing months and changing seasons, I reveled in its abundance of life that could only be noticed by stopping, taking time, and like Job, simply bearing witness to what I saw. Tiny white moths emerging from the depths, daddy longlegs sunning on the leaves, an orb spider spinning a web, ants scurrying from place to place, vines twisting and turning around the pole, doubling back, light and shadow dancing with sun and clouds. One day I came out to the cemetery and found the entire plant, which was huge by this time, had come completely off the hook. I was stunned because the vines held the whole thing up. It was incredible. As I tried reattaching the hanger and the hook, I noticed how the vines had just turned around and around and around like a thick rope and had compensated for the whole conundrum. It was a parable of resilience, speaking to my own human adaptations during pandemic time. As the months passed, my husband Steve noticed a stunning brown butterfly and another day an amazing caterpillar. Google, thankfully, helped us identify the caterpillar. It was a locust borer. So beautiful to look at, but not so good for the locust tree behind the grave. Eventually, October arrived, as did mating season for the crane flies. Hosts of them gathered on the autumn leaves. From one day to the next, I counted 7, 8, 17, 24, and those were just the ones I could see. And what was so amazing is that they were so busy mating, they didn't even care if I was like moving these leaves and counting crane flies. They were busy. The changing autumn leaves offered noble lessons of relinquishment when it was time to return to the earth as cold approached. And it made me think about my own need to relinquish and let go. What was it that I needed to drop, just like those leaves would fall? During the 7 months with Sarah's plant, I bore witness to simplicity, the beauty of small things, the power of surrender, the wonder of creation, the marvels of adaptation and resilience, the cycles of life and death. These moments took me out of myself and my pandemic journey, planting me in the midst of a much greater and grander story, a cosmic God story. Thank you so much for joining me for tonight's meditation. I am honestly humbled and overjoyed to share this contemplative view of this beloved book of my faith. And so Sarah has compiled, with thanks to my trusty cell phone that I took so many pictures, and Steve took a couple of these different views at the grave. Sarah will briefly show some pictures of the pandemic plant and its many visitors over the summer. And then she will lead us in a group conversation.
Mary, thank you so much for sharing such a powerful reflection tonight. You spoke right to the center of my heart.
Thank you.
We'd like to open it up for some sharing. You can keep yourself muted. If you have something that you'd like to share, you can unmute, share. You're welcome to drop any thoughts in the chat and I can share them for you as well. What were any insights that you gained from this talk tonight? What were in your reflections as we reflected on these questions together? So we'll hold some space for that for the next 20 minutes or so.